Have you ever felt a strange disconnect between the life you built and the person you are inside? You follow the script, you tick the boxes, you climb the ladder, you acquire the titles, the possessions, the accolades that society told you were the very definition of success. And yet, in the quiet moments, when the noise of the day fades away, there's a persistent, nagging question that echoes in the space you created. Is this it? Is this all there is? It's a profound and deeply human ache, this feeling of being a stranger in your own story, of winning a race you don't remember choosing to run. We see it everywhere, in the exhausted eyes of executives, in the forced smiles at corporate retreats, in the desperate search for the next promotion, the next purchase, the next distraction that might finally fill that unnameable void. We become masters of accumulation, but amateurs at fulfillment. We build lives that look incredible on the outside, a fortress of achievement, but inside, the throne room is empty. This isn't a failure of ambition. It's a crisis of direction. It's the silent epidemic of the modern age, a deep-seated spiritual hunger that no amount of material success can satiate. It's this very paradox, this haunting gap between having everything and feeling nothing, that obsessed a man named Robin Sharma. He wasn't just a casual observer. He was a lawyer who saw this emptiness firsthand in the lives of the most powerful people in the world, and eventually in himself. He became consumed with finding an answer, not a platitude or a quick fix, but genuine, timeless wisdom that could bridge the chasm between a successful life and a significant one. What follows is not just a summary of his findings, but a journey into the heart of that quest, a story of a man who had it all, lost himself completely, and had to travel to the roof of the world to find a truth so simple, yet so powerful, that it could change everything. The story begins not in a serene monastery, but in the heart of the concrete jungle, within the pressurized chaos of a packed courtroom. Here, we meet Julian Mantle. And Julian Mantle was not a man. He was a monument to modern success. He was a legal titan, a courtroom gladiator whose name was whispered with a mixture of awe and fear. His life was a highlight reel of victory. He wore $7,000 Italian suits that hung on his frame like bespoke armor. He drove a glistening fire-engine-red Ferrari, a mechanical beast that was less a mode of transportation and more a roaring testament to his dominance. He lived in a sprawling mansion, owned a private jet, and was a fixture in the city's most exclusive restaurants. To the outside world, Julian Mantle was the undisputed king of his domain, a man who had bent the world to his will. But beneath the surface, the monument was crumbling. At 53, he looked closer to 70. His face, once handsome and sharp, was now a pasty, wrinkled mask of perpetual fatigue. The vibrant energy that had once electrified juries was replaced by a morbid, world-weary cynicism. He was plagued by insomnia, fueled by an endless river of coffee and antacids, and haunted by the ghosts of the moral compromises he'd made to stay at the top. His relationships were hollow, his family life a distant memory. He was, in his own words, a man who had lost his soul. He was a living embodiment of that universal question we started with, a man who had gained the whole world but had forfeited himself in the transaction. The inevitable breaking point came on a perfectly ordinary Monday morning. Julian was arguing the case of his career, a high-profile airline defense. He stood before the court, a towering figure in his expensive suit, when suddenly his hand clutched his chest. A collective gasp filled the courtroom as the invincible Julian Mantle collapsed to the floor, convulsing the throes of a massive heart attack. It wasn't just his heart that gave out that day. It was the entire infrastructure of his life. The illusion of control, of power, of invincibility. It all shattered on the cold, unforgiving floor of that courtroom. He survived, but the man who left the hospital was not the same one who had entered. He had come face to face with the abyss, and the reflection he saw there terrified him. In a move that shocked the entire legal community, Julian Mantle quit. He sold his mansion. He sold his private jet. And in the ultimate act of symbolic surrender, he sold his Ferrari. He vanished, leaving behind only rumors and a legacy of courtroom victories that now seemed utterly meaningless. He was searching for an answer to the question his heart attack had screamed at him. What is the point of it all? His quest led him not to another boardroom or a more exclusive country club, but to the mystical, mist-shrouded peaks of the Himalayas, in search of a legendary group of sages said to hold the keys to enlightenment. Years pass, and Julian Mantle is all but forgotten, a ghost in the collective memory of the legal world. Then one day, a man walks into his old law firm. He is tall, lean, and radiates a profound sense of peace and vitality. His skin is smooth, his eyes sparkle with a youthful energy, and he moves with a grace that is both powerful and serene. It is Julian, but a version of himself so transformed he is almost unrecognizable. He has returned from the Himalayas, from his time with the great Sages of Sivana, and he has brought their wisdom back with him. This is where the first great breakthrough occurs, the foundational principle upon which all other wisdom is built. The sages, he explained, taught him through a series of fables, and the first and most important was a fable of the magnificent garden. They told him to picture his mind as a lush, beautiful garden. This garden is a sanctuary, a place of immense potential, but like any garden, it can only flourish with diligent care. If you let it go, weeds will inevitably creep in, choking the life out of the beautiful flowers and turning the fertile soil toxic. Most people, the sages taught, let their minds become wastelands. They allow worries, anxieties, regrets, and fears, the weeds, to run rampant. They allow the toxic waste of negative thinking to poison the soil, and they wonder why their lives are not producing beautiful fruit. The first duty of any person seeking a joyful life, therefore, is to become the master gardener of their own mind. You are the gatekeeper. You have the absolute power to decide what enters your mental garden. You can refuse entry to any negative, disempowering thought. This isn't about denial or pretending problems don't exist. It's about refusing to let those problems take root and define the landscape of your inner world. Julian learned a technique called opposition thinking. When a negative thought enters your mind, a weed of worry about finances, for instance, you don't fight it directly. Instead, you consciously and immediately replace it with its positive opposite. You replace the thought of scarcity with the thought of abundance, visualizing your bills being paid and your needs being met. It's an act of mental cultivation. Over time, as you consistently uproot the weeds and plant seeds of positivity, the entire ecosystem of your mind begins to change. The sages taught him another powerful technique, the heart of the rose. This was a simple yet profound form of meditation. Julian was instructed to find a fresh rose and a quiet place. He was to sit and simply stare into the center of the rose, its heart. He was to notice every detail, its color, its texture, its intricate design. Whenever his mind wandered, he was to gently guide it back to the singular focus of the rose. This practice, performed daily, trained his mind to focus, to find stillness in a world of chaos. It strengthened his ability to concentrate, making him the master of his attention, rather than a slave to distraction. This principle of the garden connected directly back to the hollow man Julian used to be. His old mind was a toxic, overgrown jungle of stress, ambition, and fear. He was constantly worrying about the next case, the next opponent, the next acquisition. These weeds had choked out any possibility of peace or joy. By learning to stand guard at the gate of his mind and to diligently cultivate its soil, he had transformed his inner world, and as a result, his outer world began to reflect that newfound peace and vitality. The first secret to escaping the prison of a hollow life wasn't to change your circumstances, but to first, and most importantly, change the inner landscape for which all circumstances are perceived. With this newfound mastery over his mind, Julian felt a profound sense of peace he had never known. His inner garden was becoming a place of beauty and tranquility. But a new, more subtle challenge began to emerge. A pristine garden, perfectly tended, is wonderful, but if it's enclosed by a wall with no gate leading anywhere, it's still a form of confinement. It can become a beautiful, self-contained prison of navel-gazing. He had learned how to control his thoughts. But to what end? What was the purpose of all this inner peace? This led him to the second great principle the sages taught him, illustrated by the fable of the lighthouse. In the middle of the magnificent garden, they told him to imagine a towering, sturdy lighthouse. This lighthouse represents your purpose, your calling, your reason for being. The sages called it Dharma. They taught Julian that the secret to true, lasting happiness is not found in self-gratification, but in self-actualization through service. It is about finding that one thing that you were put on this earth to do and then dedicating your life to it. The tragedy of the modern world, they explained, is that most people are sailing on the ocean of life without a destination. They are adrift, pushed and pulled by the currents of societal expectation, advertising, and peer pressure, with no lighthouse to guide them to a safe harbor. This was the story of Julian's former life. His purpose had been excellently defined. Win cases, make money, acquire status. It was a purpose devoid of personal meaning, which is why, even when he achieved it, he felt so empty. The sages guided him to understand that a true purpose is never about what you get. It's always about what you give. Finding your purpose isn't about a lightning bolt moment of divine revelation. It's a process of quiet introspection, of asking yourself, what do I love to do? What am I uniquely good at? And most importantly, how can I use these passions and talents to serve others and make a contribution? For Julian, his purpose became clear. His unique gifts for communication and persuasion, once used to enrich corporations, could now be used to share this life-changing wisdom with others who were lost, just as he had been. This lighthouse gave his tranquil inner garden a direction. The peace he cultivated was no longer just for his own benefit. It was the fuel he would use to light the way for others. This principle wasn't just a philosophical idea. It was a practical one, woven into the fabric of daily life through what the sages called the 10 rituals of radiant living. 2 of these rituals, in particular, brought the lighthouse principle to life. The first was the ritual of simplicity. This ritual taught him to live a life of conscious reduction, to free himself from the clutter of possessions and commitments that didn't align with his purpose. His old life was a monument to complexity and excess. By selling his mansion and his Ferrari, he had unknowingly performed this ritual. The sages taught him to intentionally live with less, not as an act of deprivation, but as an act of liberation. By reducing the noise of material desire, he could more clearly hear the signal from his inner lighthouse. The second was a ritual of abundance, which was a practice of deep, consistent gratitude. Every day, he was to reflect on the gifts in his life, from the beauty of sunset to the kindness of a stranger. This wasn't just about feeling thankful. It was about training his mind to see the richness that was already present, shifting his focus from what was lacking to what was abundant. This practice ensured that his journey toward his purpose was filled with joy in the present moment, not just a relentless striving for a future goal. The lighthouse provided the why, and these rituals provided the how, turning a grand purpose into a series of small, manageable daily actions. Julian had now discovered 2 monumental truths: the importance of mastering his inner world, his mental garden, and the necessity of having a guiding purpose, a lighthouse, to give his life meaning and direction. He had the what and the why. He was cultivating a peaceful mind and had a clear sense of his mission to serve others. Yet, there was a missing piece of the puzzle, a final, unifying element that transformed these separate principles from a collection of good ideas into a dynamic, living philosophy. How does one sustain this? How does one ensure that the garden remains tended and the journey toward the lighthouse continues? Day in and day out, especially when faced with the inevitable friction and inertia of life. This brought him to the grand synthesis, the unifying aha moment, encapsulated in the fable of the sumo wrestler. The sages told him to imagine a massive, powerful sumo wrestler, a symbol of immense strength and discipline, emerging from the lighthouse. And this sumo wrestler is wearing only a single, peculiar item, a pink wire cable. The seemingly bizarre image holds the ultimate key. The sumo wrestler represents the Japanese concept of kaizen, which means constant and never-ending improvement. It is the principle of small, incremental, daily progress. The sages taught Julian that the path to enlightenment, a fulfilled life, is not paved with grand, heroic leaps, but with tiny, consistent steps taken every single day. The pink wire cable symbolizes the power of this discipline. A single wire is fragile and easily broken, but when thousands of these tiny wires are woven together, they form a cable of unbreakable strength. So too are our habits. A single act of discipline, getting up an hour early, reading for 10 minutes, choosing a healthy meal, seems insignificant on its own. But when these small acts are repeated day after day, they weave together to form a character of immense strength and an unstoppable momentum. This was the ultimate realization for Julian. The life he had left behind was built on the myth of the quantum leap. The one big case, the one massive payday that would solve everything. It was a life of frantic, unsustainable bursts of effort followed by periods of burnout and exhaustion. The life of the sages was built on the gentle, unyielding power of Kaizen. The secret to a masterful life wasn't about becoming a different person overnight. It was about becoming 1% better every single day. This concept unified everything. You don't just master your mind once. You practice the discipline of Kaizen by tending your mental garden daily. The heart of the rose, opposition thinking. You don't just discover your purpose and sail off into the sunset. You practice the discipline of Kaizen by taking small, consistent steps toward your lighthouse every day. The 10 rituals. The sumo wrestler discipline is the engine that drives everything. It's the force that allows you to stand guard at the gate of your garden, and the energy that propels you towards your life's mission. The grand aha moment was this. True change is an event. It's a process. The Ferrari life was a hollow pursuit of external finish lines. The monk's life was a joyful commitment to an internal, continuous journey. The secret to selling your own symbolic Ferrari, to letting go of the empty, external validation, was to fall in love with the daily practice of becoming a better version of yourself. It was about finding joy not in the destination, but in the small, disciplined steps of the path itself. The journey of Julian Mantle is a powerful allegory for a transformation that is available to every single one of us. It's a journey from a life of frantic, hollow accumulation to one of serene, meaningful contribution. He shows us that the feeling of emptiness that so many of us experience isn't a sign that we are broken, but a signal that we're looking for fulfillment in all the wrong places. We've been taught to build our lives from the outside in, believing that if we can just acquire the right things, the right job, the right status, then we will finally feel whole on the inside. Julian's story flips that script entirely. The blueprint for a truly rich life is built from the inside out. It begins with a courageous act of taking responsibility for your inner world, of becoming the master gardener of your mind, refusing to let weeds and negativity and fear dictate your reality. From that foundation of inner peace, you can then begin to look outward, not for what you can get, but for what you can give. You can find your lighthouse, that unique purpose that gives your life direction and meaning, a purpose rooted in service to something larger than yourself. And finally, you embrace the quiet power of Kaizen, the understanding that a magnificent life is not a stroke of luck, but a masterpiece you create through thousands of small, consistent, daily brushstrokes of discipline. This isn't just a nice story. It is a practical guide to reclaiming your own life. It's an invitation to stop chasing the fleeting highs of external success and to start cultivating the enduring joy of internal growth. The first step on this path isn't some grand, dramatic gesture. You don't have to sell your car and move to a mountaintop. The first step is a simple choice, a quiet commitment you make to yourself, right here, right now. It's a commitment to tend to your garden, to look for your lighthouse, and to take one small, disciplined step today. If this journey resonates with you, if you feel that call to build a life of deeper meaning, then consider this a starting point. By subscribing, you're not just joining a channel. You're joining a community of fellow travelers on this path. You're making a small, symbolic commitment to your own growth. You are declaring that you are ready to stop being a passenger in your own life and start being the author of your own story. The keys to the kingdom were never in a Ferrari. They were always within you, waiting to be turned.